Hi, and welcome to MC Podcast 28. In studio today is Cullen Johnson. Cullen, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Good deal, man. So just kind of catch us up on where you've been, what's been going on. You've moved.
I moved, yes, I
Okay,
have.
all right. So kind of catch us up on just what's going on with Mr. Cullen Johnson these days.
So probably since the last time we talked, harvest has been in full swing.
Okay.
That's kind of been the big thing on my list of things this last. I guess.
All right. So all you do is harvest. Is this you? I mean, you don't have anything else going on in your life other than work and corn. I mean, when I ask you that question, I really expected hey, I got a new place to live.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
nice. We've been hanging out. We've been doing these things. And the first thing you step into is, well, I've been harvesting,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
harvest is just about over now. So is there anything other than work stuff that you can talk about?
Yeah,
Okay,
there is.
all
There
right,
is.
all right.
I did move. You know that I did move,
Okay.
but that
They
did.
don't know that.
That's true. That's
Okay.
true.
right.
I did move, but the caveat there is that I moved to my nursery location. So again,
We put
moving
up a
closer
tent
to
for you?
Yeah. But no,
It's a nice wall canvas tent, by the
yeah.
way. It's not one of those.
got
cheap
all the
wall-
luxuries. Got a little bit of running water, maybe a little bit of electricity. We're still working on that. But no, moved there. I'm still going to get my master's at SIU, so still doing class stuff. But yeah, just living the life of a corn breeder out in the field, pretty much.
Okay.
So,
All right. So you did. We got you moved, and you feel more at home
Yeah.
out there where the nursery is, and kind of out there on the research farm, and you'll be right there by the greenhouses.
Yep.
For this winter and everything. And so so we have to ask this question though. How did Maisie handle the move?
Well, for those who don't know, Maisie is my mini Aussie. She's a year and a half old. Loves food.
Yes.
But yes, she enjoyed actually moving out there. She has a little more space to run. She's actually getting a little more exercise as well. I brought her out with me to harvest, which dog named Maisie loves corn, so she was enjoying being able to run through the rows and whatnot. But yeah, she's enjoyed it. And having more space for both of us and having being right there is actually really nice, because once I get done with work, I can just come in and hang out with my my dog at the house.
Good deal. Hey, watch tapping the table.
Yeah.
Okay. You're making noises. All right. So hey, well, good. So you have been harvesting. I noticed this week around my house, most of the beans are out. There's guys starting to get the corn out, because around here we got planted later. There were some guys who actually planted beans before they planted corn. Buddy of mine, he actually had an auger wagon breakdown and had to unload the auger wagon so it could. So harvest is in full swing.
Yes.
Is what I was talking about. So you've gotten. How has harvest been for you this year?
There's two different types of harvests that I've been doing this year. Had hand harvest for the nursery to get everything out. We had done pollinations on over the summer. Those include selections, new hybrid combinations, any type of seed increases that I wanted to do. So we have some seed for next year for hybrids. But that's the first kind of harvest that I did. We also recently got a research combine,
Yes.
so we're able to test for yield levels and moisture levels and see how those compare, so we can determine these new hybrids that we have, what relative maturity are they at. And that's kind of the big step of when we're testing for hybrids. We're also looking for things that yield well in those relative maturity ranges.
So harvest went well. I mean,
Yes.
No major breakdowns.
No major
fall
breakdowns.
aparts.
Nope.
How about the combine?
Combine.
Any major breakdowns?
No, not
Any
there,
major
not
fall
there. No,
apart?
no, no,
Okay.
no.
All right. Well, good. No, so everything with your harvest went smooth, and you're done. You're
Yes.
done with your harvest now. So, we spoke about this research combine, and which leads kind of to this question of, as a company right now that is a corn company that is focused on forage quality, and I think that we would all admit that we are focused on the feedability of those hybrids, and breeding and developing for good starch digestibility, good fiber digestibility. Why is it important for us to have a research combine to measure grain yield?
Well, like you said, first and foremost, we are thinking about the nutrition of our hybrids. That's foremost in our minds. And when we look at other research companies, the other bigger companies, they have it kind of backwards. They're thinking more of the yield first and then going and saying, oh, yeah, this is nutritious,
Okay.
and not really actually having a measure for that either. They're just saying it is nutritious.
Yeah. Or it has the look of a good silage hybrid.
Or of a good, yeah.
Or, and I think that you're right. I think there's a lot of companies who breed corn and then they find the hybrids that are going to work for silage.
Yeah.
Right. And so we are focused on those kinds of things. But at the same time, we're not just focused on doing that, because I think a lot of times guys have in their mind that a silage hybrid is a grain hybrid that won't stand up, or is big, tall, and leafy, and has lots of plant mass, and that's the way they're thinking. So if I say this is a silage specific hybrid, they're thinking it won't stand long enough to harvest it for grain, which is not where we are at all.
No, that's what we're using this research combine for, is so that, yes, we have these hybrids that we said, okay, this one's very nutritious compared to 5160 or 5660 or something like that. Now, how does these new hybrids that are coming out compare to that in yield as well? We're looking for those things that have the good stay green, have good stalk qualities, good root qualities, along with how it looks going through the combine. That's one thing that I kind of put my own little twist on. I give a rating on how well it looks going through the combine, but that's what I guess sets us different, is that we've determined that those are nutritious. Now we have to determine that they're also going to yield well. And if for example, we need to have this hybrid, the term that gets thrown around is dual purpose.
Right.
The way I kind of look at
Which
that
I hate the term dual purpose.
Yeah, it's kind of again, if you talk to one company, it means something versus us, where we say, okay, this is very nutritious, and if there is a problem where you can't get out in the field, it can go to grain and still yield at a certain level that is very competitive with everything else that's out there as well.
Right. And so, yeah, you're right. I kind of get that question of, well, do you have dual purpose hybrids? No, but depending on how you define it. I personally don't like the term dual purpose, because I think it harkens to that thought that this is a grain hybrid that we're using for silage. Whereas for us, this is these are bred and developed for nutritional qualities, and not even necessarily bred just for silage, although all of our hybrids can be used for silage, right?
Yep.
All of our hybrids can be used for that whole plant silage and feedability, but we want to make sure that there is lots of grain there for that guy who's going to have that field that maybe he doesn't need all the silage and is going to take some to the elevator. We're also going to do that for the guy who is going to who is going to take some grain to feed, whether it be high moisture or dry grain. And so we want to make sure that those grain yields are as high as anything else in the industry.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of on my side, and I kind of give a little preface to this, is that I came from a yield breeding background, where I came from hard grain. Make the kernels extremely hard, and this is just going to be shipped for export. When I came to Master's Choice, I did have kind of a switch in mindset, and actually we had discussions in the first few months where I was really struggling with the idea of that dual purpose hybrid idea. I was thinking, okay, what if we just put tonnage in the bunker and we just called it tonnage? Where, after a few months here, when we got to talking and explaining exactly what quality means, that's where kind of my mindset kind of changed a little bit.
So you're saying that we corrupted you?
I wouldn't say corrupted, just shown the light.
Shown the light.
Shown the light. Shown the light.
Okay,
But
I'll go with that.
This also goes back to back when I was younger. My dad explained that quality of your work is better than the quantity of your work.
Okay.
There's certain level of quantity you need to get done, but
Right.
there's a quality of your work that needs to be done as well. I think that translates into how I breed for corn and how this company is pursuing corn. It's a quality thing. It's not we're not going to put 150, 200 hybrids out that are going to be all across the United States. We're going to get those really good ones that are quality, that are going to work across multiple environments. They're going to be stable across those environments and really benefit the farmer more than just saying, okay, we've got all these hybrids that yield above 200 bushels in a 175 bushel environment.
Yeah.
That's where I think us as Master's Choice we we are changing that kind of mindset, and you can see that over the recent years as
Right.
well.
So we don't breed and develop for dual purpose.
No.
Okay. But we do breed and develop for corn hybrids that can be taken for silage,
Yes.
and that can be taken for grain.
Yes.
Also looking at the feedability, not just of the whole plant, but also of the grain when we're there. And we actually have a few hybrids that we would not recommend that you take to grain and feed.
Exactly.
You know, I'm thinking of 6750 that I would not recommend that as a feeding. Now, because I know that the texture of that corn is not exactly where we would like it to be, but it fit in a space that we needed something. Now, the fiber digestibility is some of the best in our lineup, some of the best that I've ever seen, you know, on that hybrid. Great fiber digestibility, great feeding qualities when you can take it at proper moisture, when you can let it sit in the silage pile for a little while and let that starch digestibility kind of develop. But, you know, a guy who's going to say, well, I need something that I can feed as dry grain, I'm not going to recommend that hybrid. A guy who says, I'm going to take it to the elevator, I might recommend that hybrid because it's going to have high grain yields, but yet it just doesn't have the feedability. So let's talk a little bit, you and I here, let's talk a little bit about how we would, what parameters we would use to recommend hybrids for high moisture and for dry grain that a guy is going to harvest and feed. Okay. So as a breeder, what are you looking for there?
On the breeding side, I'm looking for things that kind of as an overall, though, I'm looking for something that's going to give you a little bit of a larger harvest window because you don't want to be packed into getting it all in a week and say like it has anthracnose. I think of one hybrid that I've kind of been working with for a little bit is that it has late season anthracnose issues.
Okay.
Essentially, it dies off quick in the stalks and gets rooty and kind of falls around. I wouldn't recommend that as a grain hybrid necessarily because you want to have that stand up and still be out in the field and be able to get your combine through. I might put that more towards a silage only option or even with this specific hybrid. I know the starch is really good, so I would say high moisture corn as well. But I'd stay away from keeping it all the way to grain.
So just for those who may not hear these terms for the first time, what is the difference between high moisture corn, and dry grain?
Okay.
So
high moisture corn is between 38, 40 at a max, very max. I wouldn't go any over 38. Down to 24 points of moisture, percent moisture, because
that's points of moisture, not dry matter.
Not dry matter. That's grain moisture. That's going to be your kind of ideal window. Once you get to 24, then that starts switching over to this needs to be taken for dry grain and gone into an elevator or gone into your grain bin or go to an elevator and get that down to the 15.5 that elevators and whatnot need to have to take to export and whatnot. Or even if you're feeding it on farm, you'd like to bring that down. So that's kind of the
level for high moisture.
For high moisture,
and then dry grain would be what we typically think about. Dry grain that is 15% or below, and then put in a grain bin and augered out and ground up.
And black layer is kind of that time when. I guess when those types of high moisture has still a little bit of a black layer involved in it, but once it gets past, like I said, that 24%, now you need to stop thinking about as high moisture in packing it somewhere and then actually getting it into a grain bin somewhere.
Yeah, because at that point it's too dried out to ferment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And with high moisture, we're really wanting kind of a little bit of fermentation there, and the starch digestibility is higher. The wetter, the texture, and we talk about this a lot. But, the texture of corn really affects the digestibility or is an indicator of digestibility. Let me say that, because high moisture corn is softer, more floury than what we would consider dry grain.
Yeah, and not all of the harder grain has been fixed as much as it would be at a 24 or low or level. When you're in that 24 to 38, you still have where some of that harder grain hasn't been totally fixed over into total harder
so
grain.
it hasn't set the proline and proteins.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're looking at to kind of get back to where we were when you're looking at a hybrid that you're going to recommend for somebody to take for dry grain, or even for high moisture corn to some degree. You're looking for something that's definitely gonna have good plant intactness later on in the season.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so what are the other measures there that you're looking at?
Obviously the more softer starch would be a plus for any type of high moisture, because it's when you look at a kernel, two different kernels, one that has a higher amount of harder grain, one that has a higher amount of softer grain, you would rather have the softer one in a high moisture environment, because it's going to allow for more available energy from the kernel itself.
Yes, and quicker.
And quicker.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of another area where I look at. There's some other root structures. I guess that goes into plant integrity and stuff. But I would like to have, if anything, a wider cob, just in case if you want to take like an earlage or something where you're actually taking the cob with it. The white cobs are traditionally thought of being a little bit more softer.
Yeah.
And gets a little more digestible in a way, where the redder cobs have kind of been shied
The redder
away
cobs
from.
are a little bit harder. And just a little bit less palatable.
And that's and I don't know if there's any studies out there kind of explaining that entirely, but that's kind of the industry. People think of wider cobs being softer, maybe gets a little more disease once you take that later on in the season. So typically when you think of taking things for grain, you think of red cob, hard dent, and something that can stay in the field when it's completely dried down. And then, if you're taking for high moisture, you're still going to have a little bit of greenness of the plant. If you could have that softer kernel, good health overall would be preferred. Because if you get bad health package in, for gray leaf spot or northern or something like that, that's taking out of that yield that you can get into, say, the high moisture, and even in the harder grain, you're going to be losing a little bit of yield.
Yeah. That makes sense. When I'm looking at recommending, if a guy, because if you were to pick up our hybrid guide and you go, oh well, which one of these we don't really make those recommendations. I think there's a chart on the back that we make some of those silage, dry grain,
high moisture,
high moisture. Like I think something along those lines, where we kind of put some X's in a box, and so when I'm looking at a hybrid and going to recommend something, I want a hybrid with a good flexier, one that's going to put on a lot of grain, and one that's going to, even for high moisture or just dry grain, I want something that's going to be flexier, that's going to have big kernels, and those are typically the hybrids that I like to recommend for a guy who's going to maybe leave some of his silage for that, or planting specifically for high moisture or dry grain.
And that kind of goes back to the way things have been breeding over the last 60 years, is that we've been breeding more towards harder grain. And if you have a hard grain, it weighs just the same, because farmers get paid off bushels per acre, right? So
they don't necessarily get paid off bushels per acre. A farmer who takes to the elevator gets paid off of what?
Weight.
He doesn't get paid off volume.
It's weight.
Which
is why your test weight needs to be at 56 or higher. Yes. So you can take a small kernel that's really hard and has a test weight of 56, or you can take a softer kernel that's larger and still be at that 56.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where breeding has kind of brought us, where the kernels have been getting a little bit smaller, a little bit more, I guess, flinty is the way.
Yeah. Vitreous.
Flinty vitreousness. And so you're still getting that same amount of weight per kernel. It's just they're smaller.
They're
so
smaller,
and they're more packed in there, and that's where breeding has gone. Where now, when you could bring in that more softer kernel, if you can increase the softer kernel's size, you're going to still get that weight that you need, especially when you take it into a high moisture environment, and then you get the energy increase as well. So same weight, same amount of I guess mass would be the way of saying it, but you're also getting more energy. If you took a kernel that's smaller or at the same size and it's really hard, you're not going to get as much energy.
And
correct?
I had a question I was going to ask you, and it has escaped me at the moment.
Uh-huh.
But it was about hard grain. versus softer grain, and something about bushel weight, or I know what it
Oh,
was.
test
Now
on the test
yeah,
weight thing?
test weight. So here's the question. Now that I ran around that mulberry
Yeah.
bush to remember, are we going to lose test weight with the more flowery, softer endosperm and Master's Choice corn? I mean, are we looking at being docked for test weight at the elevator?
There might be one or two hybrids that I would say maybe there's a dock, but I wouldn't say entirely no, because you're making up for it with our, we're not. I guess in a way I should put this where you're not going to get docked at all.
Yeah.
It's just they're going to see if they go up there and they grab that kernel, they're going to say, okay, this is
right.
This is softer. Well, what was the deal? And then they test the actual test weight, and it's not going to be really any different.
With Master's Choice hybrids, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not. Okay, is that that we're sitting at that 56-pound test weight most of the time. You're probably not going to find a Master's Choice hybrid with the 62, 64-pound test weight.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're gonna be on that 56, maybe some 55s in there. But we're not gonna really lose out on test weight.
Yeah. I would agree, because that's the industry standard, and this goes back again to the research combine, is that we can test for test weight as well, and determine, okay, well, this one's going to be at like a 53. Do we want to move this one forward? Probably not. And when you recommend it, right, you wouldn't recommend it to go to grain.
Exactly,
right?
And that's what I was going to say, is that maybe if we had one that was consistently at 53 or 52, that would be one that we would say, okay, take it for high moisture, but if you're going to take it to or even if you're going to feed it, go ahead and feed it. But if you're needing to take something to the elevator, this is probably not the corn that you're going to want to plant to do that.
And I guess this kind of goes into just general management on the farm. Just know where you're going to end up taking that grain. If you already have plans on this certain acreage we're going to take for silage, then this certain acreage we're going to take for high moisture, and then this we're going to take to the elevator. Know what you're going to plant in those areas beforehand, because that's pretty important to know that you're getting the best possible hybrid on those acreages. For whatever those, so that goes back to planting all the way back into wintertime and springtime before you even plant.
Right.
That's one of those things that makes a good farmer even more profitable later on in the year.
So that when he knows, okay, this is the hybrid that I'm going to use on this field, and this is what its best end use is.
Yes,
exactly.
And that goes to the quality thing.
Right.
You're finding something that has the highest quality for that specific market or specific end use you're going to do. And that's where the bigger companies have kind of failed us. Everything now for end use to them is it's going to go to the elevator.
Yeah.
That's their thought, and that's where they want to see the money from. And that's where farmers are getting paid from.
It's the guy who's planting the corn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You look at the industry today, and we have consolidated the animals. We no longer have, there are places that are the exception to this rule, but there is no longer the guy who is planting the corn and then grazing his corn, or grazing the cows on the corn stubble, over winter like Grandpa used to do, and not, we've taken the animals off the land, and we've separated the guy who is growing the corn from the guy who is feeding the corn. Okay, and as a corn company, there is a strong pull to cater to the guy who is buying that bag of seed, because the guy at the feedlot is not buying that bag of feed. The guy who has got the pigs is not buying that bag of seed. The guy who is raising the chickens is not buying that bag of seed. Right?
Yep.
It's the guy who's planting that, and we've catered to him. And we go back to this, that he is the guy who is taking that corn out of the field, putting it in a truck, and driving it over the scales at the elevator. And he's getting paid on how much that truckload weighs. And we've really focused on him. And so we've made that harder, heavier grain. We've also, made it where the corn stalks are less digestible. And so that it can stand till November, December, and that's not always the case. But we've made those stalks stand in higher population situations where we cram all of those plants in there together. They get as as big around as your thumb maybe, and then we want them to stand up.
Yeah, lignified all to get out,
exactly.
And then you want to have that, and a lot of times when you add in things like corn borer tolerance, rootworm tolerance and stuff like that, typically those types of genetics, coming from my side, are typically going to be more lignified in the whole plant mass, just all over.
Yep.
And that's why things have been kind of going towards less and less digestible over the so many years that corn breeding has been happening.
Definitely. And so we as a corn company, we're saying let's focus on the end use of that corn. Let's focus on that. I read a little bit of an article the other day that Rutgers University has developed a transgenic gene that increases methionine in corn, and they are they're looking at that for the African market, for the guys, for over there where that's a corn heavy human diet, and adding that to make that more nutritious. I think that we're seeing a turn in the industry. It's kind of my direction there, is that we're starting to see a turn in the industry where corn is not just corn anymore, and that we just don't put more of it in there, even though I think here recently corn dropped below $3 a bushel. It's cheap, and so we'll just put more and more in. But I really think there's a turn in the industry to begin to look at the end use. What are we actually using this corn for? And let's breed and develop for the end use of that corn.
And I mean, look at me. I came from a breeding for high yield and hard grain type of breeding program, and now I'm seeing, like we talked about earlier, seeing the light, right?
Hey, you've come over to the light side. You're no longer at the dark side.
Yeah. So
exactly, you're like Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. I wish, but So that's the. I feel like that's the progression of things as well. As we go over these next 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to see a large shift in the industry from that hard grain stuff the grain bins to a more quality-based, let's figure out who's going to be using this feed in the end and making sure that we're most efficient on that end. And then, in a way, I kind of see that also bumping corn prices, because we're not going to be producing as much, hard grain. We're still going to have it. That's going to be still a thing, because we're going to still be exporting and so on and so forth. But we're going to be thinking about, that in use more and more, which means maybe we don't produce as much, but we are getting more efficient on the farm in the later end.
And in there it becomes a game of efficiencies. And so I'm really hesitant to say not producing as much, because I think that we can yield just as much with corns that are bred and developed for a specific end use. And I think that that's part of the fear in the industry, and kind of that fear mongering is, if we go down this road, we've been down this road before, we had our high lysine corn and we had our waxy corn and we just didn't yield what they should have. Well, by golly, I mean, we have got the technology to make those things yield now.
Yeah.
And we've got the technology to do that. And so I think that more than just producing less and bumping price, I think when we really start to focus in on that specific end use, I think we can bump price, because there's going to be a benefit to the guy who's feeding it. It's not just hard, dented, number 2 yellow corn at $2.75 a bushel. Come get all you want. Right? It is. This corn is bred and developed specifically for pigs, and guys, it's going to make your pigs perform better, more efficiently. You can faster weight gains and those things, and those guys are gonna pay a premium for that. And so I think that sometimes. I think there's sometimes, as Daddy would say, more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah. And
yes, producing lots of grain makes it cheap. That doesn't help. That doesn't necessarily help the farmer.
Yeah.
And so, but also I think we can really specify some of those things and get there. So, all right. Before we get way off on too many things there and get way too emotional, and what have you. Let me say this: we do have guys in the middle of grain harvest. What are some things? Some things to say. If you're going to go grain, if you're getting ready to harvest grain, Cullen, give us the first 5-10 big tips of making this a successful grain harvest.
Okay, so first, slow down. When I find
Me
myself,
slow down?
no,
Don't tell me
not
to
you.
slow down.
Not you.
Oh, okay, this is my podcast.
Talking to our farmers out there.
Okay.
Slow down. I find myself whenever I'm in the combine, I typically want to speed up, get through that because I want to get home and get some dinner and have a nice sit down at TV, watch some TV, kick up my feet.
So I'm sensing a theme here because when we told guys when they were planting, we told them to slow down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now when they're harvesting, we're telling them to
slow down.
Slow down. Okay.
So what ends up happening is if you get the combine rolling a little too quick because you're wanting to push it through and get through the night, and if you're running all night, you do that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks straight, yeah, you're going to get tired. But if you slow down a little bit, you're going to get less of a yield loss later on. Less corn getting dropped on around out of your combine when it's coming through the rolling rolling pins and grabber chains and whatnot. If you slow down, like I said, you're not going to lose as much corn.
Okay.
There's a little bit of an evaluation for this, and I'll just give the kind of simple and easy one. For 187 feet, if you drop 1 ear, that is a 1 bushel per acre loss.
Okay.
So if you're moving quicker and the corn's kind of bouncing in, as it's coming in the header, if it's bouncing off, 1 ear just pops right off. That's a bushel per acre for 187 feet.
Okay.
Okay. Now you can also do a 1 foot square kind of box too, and if you can find two kernel loss per square foot, that could be coming off the header, or that can be coming off the back of the combine as trash is coming out and stuff are kind of bouncing around out in the back. That if you find 2 kernels per square foot,
2 kernels per square
that's
foot.
an acre or a bushel per acre loss.
Really? 2 kernels?
2 kernels per square foot. So that, and I find a lot of times when you go out to a field about 2 or 3 weeks after a combine has rolled through, you're going to see a lot of corn popping up off the ground. It's because maybe their combine's not set right. Maybe the thresher's wrong. Thresher speed maybe gets to go down a little bit. But that's kind of the big thing is guys get out there and they start hammering it and going quick, and they drop off a lot of corn out of the back and off the head.
I have seen cornfields that look like they went back in and drilled corn in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you have more corn in the field now than you did when you planted.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's people get amped up. You see your neighbor. I did this year. I could say from personal experience, I did this year. I watched guys harvesting all around me about 2 weeks before I needed to harvest, and I got antsy. I wanted to get out there and start rolling my combine because the neighbor was doing it. Slow down, take a deep breath, make sure all your equipment is properly set.
Okay.
Your yield monitor needs to be properly calibrated. If you have a guy at the John Deere dealership or the IH dealership or whatever, those guys,
or the gleaner,
or something like that,
or the cloth,
or
we're not going to discriminate here.
Yeah. Anyway, but if you have a guy that is doing that for you, make sure you get that combine in early. Make sure it gets set early because everybody else is doing the same thing. Everybody wants their combine set properly and running efficiently. Also, as you switch, and this is kind of some weeks back, when you switch from doing corn and you still have some corn acreage left, and then you have some bean fields you need to get in, make sure that you keep kind of on track on where how much yield loss you're getting per day. I had kind of pulled up a little research paper here. Basically, here's a study that showed that corn loss grain moisture at about 0.4 points per day comes down at 55 to 60%. So if you think about that, if you're having a 55 degree to 60 degree day every day for about 10 days, you've already lost 4 points of moisture. Okay. So when you switch over from corn and go to beans, if you have a 10 days of harvest there, 60 degree weather, you've already lost 4% moisture in the grain. So say say you're at 24%.
Yeah.
You're now down to 20%.
Yeah.
Say when you switched over to beans, you were at, 18% moisture when you stopped. Now you're down to 14.
Now you're down to 14.
But at that point, you're also losing yield.
Yeah.
Here's another study that said field losses of 1% per week starting in early October. So at the time that we're recording this podcast, it's early October. You are now losing 1% yield out of the field per week. So typically right about now, I guess, and even in our area, we're probably at that 18% moisture right now. When you lose 4% moisture over 10 days, and you're now losing 1% a week, you are losing a lot of grain yield.
Yeah.
You may not have to dry it as much, but you're losing a lot of grain yield in the end, especially 1% of that's 170.
But we're also saying at the same time, slow down.
Slow down. Yeah,
Take your time.
Take your time.
Take your time. But don't be the guy who has the last stuff out.
Yeah, because you
Makes
are
sense.
losing a lot week in and week out, and that can go up to 10% of your yield loss as well, because things are falling down. Maybe that hybrid, if it didn't have a good stay green later on in the year, it's going to fall over. It's not, it's going to have issues. Here's another one. Know where your problem fields are. Okay. Places that are a little lower, maybe a little wetter, you can leave them out there for just a little bit longer.
Makes sense.
Okay. Secondly, if you have damaged crops, say corn rootworm or some corn borer came in, or earworm, where you don't have traits on that field, and maybe you're taking it for like an organic or a conventional corn. Yeah. Remember where those problem areas are, especially for borers and rootworms, because now those fields are going to be even more damaged the longer you leave it out there.
Sense.
You're going to have stalk lodging, root lodging. You're going to lose yield that way as well. So knowing where your problem fields are, addressing those first is usually the primary fields you want to go to. And then just knowing where maybe you can leave a few other fields out for a little bit longer. Finding that if you know for a fact this acreage is going to go for grain, then find something that's got good stay green. Find something that's going to have good disease tolerance and insect tolerances. Find that type of hybrid that's going to be good on that acreage, so you can leave it there once you turn over to beans, and you can come back to it and know for a fact you're not going to be losing as much when you do get back to it.
That makes sense. So kind of a same theme question, but just a question just to ask. So we see a lot of corn sometimes right as we're getting ready to harvest it, that the top of the corn plant is broken out of. Okay, so the top of it is, but the ear's still there, the plant's still there. I mean, is that a problem or not?
Well, I guess this is from from the way I look at it. It's just kind of a visual thing.
Right.
It's a hybrid that's still got the ear on it. You're not having any issues there. When you have, say, stalk lodging, though, where the stalks are leaned over, your root lodging where the whole plant's leaning over, that's going to be more of a problem to address. But the tops are out of it, it's okay. Now, if you start seeing where the tops are out and maybe like three-quarters of the plant, maybe even a half of the plant is still up there, you still have the ear height being low, that's going to be one that maybe you need to address a little bit quicker. I'm a kind of a coffee shop, sit around when I talk to a farmer type of guy. So when I see my field like that, I might be more antsy to go get it. But if you, like I said, if you know where your problem areas are, where there's going to be some insect pressure or disease pressure, something like that, I would have tried to address those first to make sure that field would get out prior to say something that just has the tops out of it.
Makes sense. Good deal. Cullen, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you. I know that you've been busy, and I know that you do have more going on in your life than just harvesting corn and shelling corn and drying corn and counting seed and all of that. And so, but just appreciate you, and thanks for joining us today.
Yes, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
All right, bud. Hey, thank you all for listening out there. We appreciate you listening in. Remember always that we are social. You can catch us on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Thanks, guys.